Be very careful, because many of those seats are in
as a
districts where we
former
are.
party chairman, Reince, how would you handle a vice chair who was going to primary?
Well, I'll answer and then I'll explain it. I mean, unfortunately, David, I'd have you removed from the party because I think, number one, I think you're sincere. I don't question that. I think you're right. The Democrats are a complete mess. They have no movement.
I don't think that's exactly what he said.
He said they've got no message. They've got no movement. They've got no leader. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. I mean, you're defending Harvard. You're traveling to El Salvador for MS-13 gang members. But here's the point.
Alleged.
You're taking $20 million. If I'm looking at someone, my vice chair, the RNC, taking $20 million for another effort, it's $20 million out of the DNC's pocket. You can't be on the board of the Fishing and Forest Company and on Greenpeace at the same time. There are places for groups to hold the party accountable. I think it's right.
Yeah, let me push back against that. This was not an MS-13 gang member, and you damn well know that.
Oh, come on.
He was not.
Okay, so keep defending this guy.
The administration admitted this was wrong. In America, we have due process, and we are a land of law and order. We are a land of law and order. And this administration is repeatedly showing time and time again they do not care about what the Supreme Court says. They do not care about the rule of law. And you cannot defend sending people to another country.
Just did a poll
to another country where they don't have
Americans
rights.
Think that
where he's
all
being denied counsel, due process, and so much more.
By the way, so you're losing your effort. So if you want to try to defend the constitutionality of deporting a illegal immigrant.
National Committee is spending $20 million running against other Democrats. Aren't we supposed to run against Republicans?
What's your response?
What's his plan to deal with our 27% approval rating? That's my question to him. The fact of the matter is right now, our party is in a crisis. We are seeing people lose faith in our party. They're losing faith in democracy across the country. And we need to make sure that we're getting people to vote for Democrats, not simply because we're not Donald Trump, but because we have a better message, a better option for them. Not simply the less bad of two options, as I think Carville tries to promote when he says, well, we just shouldn't say anything. Carville believes in a politics of being timid, of hiding. I believe in fighting. And that is what people want to see right now from the Democratic Party. And we just saw an example of that with Senator Van Hollen going to El Salvador to say, we need to meet with this man. And yes, Democrats obviously are in the minority right now, but let's be clear, we cannot win back the majority if we do not convince the American people that our party offers something that isn't just not Donald Trump, but is substantially better than Donald Trump, that fights to lower costs for Americans across the country, whether it's healthcare, housing, or the foundational building blocks of the American dream that feels so out of reach for people, or addressing gun violence. We can't simply just hide, as Carville repeatedly promotes, not to mention the fact that, frankly, he has not won an election since before I was born. I think it's time for some new voices in our party.
When were you born?
2000.
Well, I guess that. So anyway, I can hear James Carville's head exploding all the way from New Orleans when you called him timid. And James, you're welcome back on the show next week. And you
Happy to talk more.
And you can respond.
Something that's clearly going on, it's so obvious for everybody to see, is there are what I call talking heads. That's the polite way. There's loads of other derogative terms. James Carville is a man for all opinions. Supposedly, he's a Democratic expert because in previous campaigns, he's had something to do with the president-elect, etc., etc., all of that stuff. You can Google it. My point being is, I tend to think elections from the last two elections are very different to elections that may have happened in the 80s or 90s. So when James Carville is weighing in with his expertise, maybe he's looking from afar. The reason I say that is because what he is doing right now is just stirring the infighting within the Democratic Party. Not because he'd like to, I think, find a solution, but because he'd like to pick a paycheck up. Because this is what happens. It's not clickbait, it is clipbait. Carville says something, it's pushed out on social media, a little quote here, a little tidbit there, and he picks up a check and gets another booking. He's always looking right now as when he's playing for somebody within the Democratic Party to attack. No idea why. Because he's one of these people who has an opinion on everything until it actually counts, and then he's either sitting on the fence or missing in action. This week, he's decided to have a go at David Hogg, who's now a very senior member of the Democratic Party, attempting to get more Gen Z people to vote for the Democrats. That's his task. Carville, for reasons best known to himself, considers himself an elite above it all, knows so much more. So instead of focusing on what's going on in the Republican Party, decides to, well, it's an easy one, isn't it? Then you add in Jake Tapper, who is, I think Jake Tapper is soft MAGA. I really, really do. Just remember that interview when they did the town hall, they gave Trump such an easier time in comparison to Biden. But that's neither here nor there. The reason I say that is Tapper with Hogg, you watch that back and you think, if I was David Hogg, I wouldn't have done the interview, truth be told. Jake Tapper is no friend of the Democratic Party, and nor is CNN. For them, it's just like, let's keep the fire going. Let's keep the fight going. Oh, we got some infighting, great. That's what we'll do. And where's it leading to? Just down a hole. Look, we're not even to the first 80 days of the Trump presidency. I don't think the Democrats are in any rush, or need to be in any rush, to find their new heir apparent. But of course, CNN needs to stoke it all up. So if I was David Hogg, I would just ignore anything Carville has to say. Let him carry on and wind himself out, run into... This is the craziest thing. Why do all the cable news station thinks James Carville has the answer? You tell me. Stop randomly 100 people right now. James who, they'll say?
Quote she used, Maggie, "We are all afraid." Is that fear justified?
Look, she's saying something that you have heard senators say over time privately and most vocally, frankly, Casey, around the January 6th Senate impeachment trial of Donald Trump, which I think was in February of 2021 was when the trial itself took place. January 6th with obviously the event and the attack on the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. You had some senators who were afraid that they were going to see their families targeted. And so, you know, is her, I can't speak for why she feels afraid or is it justified, but it is certainly something that we hear over and over again. I would say that Congress and the Senate, the House and the Senate, are co-equal branches of the government, and they represent constituents. And if they have concerns, you know, what would seem to be keeping them from speaking out is, you know, maybe it's personal fears, but in a lot of cases, it's fears of them losing their jobs, and that's sort of a different issue than fear of personal safety or something else.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely taken. I guess when I was asking, is it justified? It's just, you noted in your story that there seems to have been this evolution for Trump himself. Right, that there has been this change. I think my question is there really a marked difference in his behavior here? And do you think that you see a willingness on his part to go after people in a new way?
Oh, sure. Look, I mean, this was Jonathan Swan and Mike Schmidt and Charlie Savage and I wrote about this. I don't think there's been an evolution in terms of what Trump would like to use the levers of government for. I think there has been an evolution in terms of how he is using the levers of government and how streamlined and centralized it is within the White House. So, you know, instead of using his Twitter feed or having phone calls with Jeff Sessions, as we saw in 2017, you had in the Oval Office last week Donald Trump signing presidential memoranda targeting two individuals who had worked in the first Trump administration, one of whom because he disagreed that the election was stolen and spoke openly about that. And that is a line crossed that we had not seen before. And what that portends for the future, we shall see.
All right, Maggie Haberman, so grateful to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. And I do hope that you come back soon.
Turn to the administration and the judicial branch of the United States government. The Trump administration is finding ways to defy the courts on a few fronts right now. One is refusing to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Another example is continuing to block the Associated Press from covering the president, despite a judge ordering the White House to treat the AP like other news organizations. Sir, I know that you have said that the president defying court orders would create a constitutional crisis. Are we there?
I think what we need right now is certainly, we're in a crisis across the board, right? I mean, that is obvious for everyone to see. This is not normal. The president is assaulting the economy, assaulting Social Security, assaulting healthcare, assaulting the American way of life, and assaulting our democracy. None of this is normal. It is all a crisis. Now, with respect to what we need to deal with in terms of the situation with the courts, the Supreme Court needs to aggressively enforce its judicial orders. The White House is seeking a confrontation with the courts, then the courts need to lean into that. We will have the back of the courts, and it needs to use all of the tools available to it, like contempt,
for example,
in terms of the people within the administration who are failing to adhere to these judicial orders or who are actively continuing to propagate unlawful or unconstitutional actions at Donald Trump's direction.
Well, we did see one example of the threat of contempt yesterday. A federal judge did that with regard to those flights that left after he signed an order saying that they shouldn't go. But you think that that threat should go all the way up to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land?
Well, in the case of Mr. Abrego Garcia, there was a Supreme Court decision that was issued. And so when you have a Supreme Court decision that was issued instructing the administration to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return, and it seems to me that ultimately the court is going to need to aggressively enforce its decision. When you've got lower courts who have issued orders, then of course the jurisdiction will fall with them.
I just want to make sure I am understanding you right. Are you saying that the Supreme Court should hold President Trump in contempt, should hold his cabinet members who were involved in this in contempt?
The Supreme Court needs to take a close look at enforcing its orders, and that is generally going to involve not the president, of course, at this moment in time, but is going to involve cabinet secretaries and other administration officials who are responsible for the actual execution of these orders or the non-compliance.
How is that not a constitutional crisis?
Of course, the courts are going to have to be. I said that we are in a crisis across the board. We are in a crisis across the board in every way possible, including the assault on the democratic way of life. Now, the courts are going to have to aggressively enforce its. We are in a crisis. We've apparently been in a crisis, I think, since January 20th, across the board. We're in an economic crisis. We're in a democracy crisis. We're in a crisis as it relates to the assault on health care, the assault on Social Security. None of this is normal.
I just really want to...
answering a question about Jerome Powell. Let's take a listen.
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. I let him know it, and if I want him out, he'll be out of there real fast, believe me.
So
Go ahead, please. Question?
Are you trying to remove him, Mr. President?
Yeah, question?
Mr.
President, yesterday Judge Boasberg, in a case against your administration, said the Constitution does not tolerate willful disobedience of judicial orders. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, you're going to have to speak to the lawyers. We have great lawyers. I can tell you this, we're doing a fantastic job of getting criminals out of this country who Biden allowed into the country. Hundreds of thousands of criminals, murderers and drug dealers. And I was elected because of the fact, I would say maybe that was the number one factor, a lot of reasons, the economy, a lot of things. But one of the primary reasons I was elected is because I said, I'm going to get the criminals that he allowed to come into our country so stupidly through open borders. I'm going to get them out. And I got a lot of votes, record-setting numbers of votes, as you know. We won everything. The popular vote, all 7 swing states, we won everything. And that's what the public wanted, and that's what I'm doing. But you have to speak to the lawyers because it's up to them.
Mr. President, what do you think of the proposal from France?
Say it.
What do you think of the proposal from France and UK of a peace mission in Ukraine with soldiers? And do you think that Italy should take part into it?
Well, I think Italy will have to make that determination, but peace missions are always good with me. I'm okay with peace missions. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, have you discussed what areas of cooperation have you discussed with the Prime Minister vis-a-vis Italy and the United States and Europe and the United States? And on China?
We discussed it very briefly. No, we're doing very well with negotiations, I think, with all countries. And Scott could tell you a little bit, but we are doing very well. We have a lot of countries that want to make a deal. Frankly, they want to make deals more than I do. Go ahead, Scott. Would you say something, please?
Yeah, we've got a process in place. We're working on the big 15 economies. First, we had a fantastic meeting with Japan yesterday. I believe there's been calls with the EU already. And then we have South Korea coming in next week. And I believe India is also talking, that's moving very quickly.
Ukraine's President Zelensky has said he has evidence that China is supplying weaponry or ammunition to Russia. Do you have any evidence along those lines? And also, he said we could see a minerals deal signed this week. Is that?
Well, we have a minerals deal, which I guess is going to be signed on Thursday, Scott.
Let's start off with this case of Mr. Abrego Garcia. You heard my conversation with Senator Van Hollen. The Justice Department called the deportation of Mr. Abrego Garcia a, quote, administrative error. The Supreme Court has ordered the government to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return. Should Mr. Abrego Garcia be returned to the United States, Senator?
Well, Chris is my friend, and I respect him, and he's certainly entitled to his opinion, but in my judgment, he is utterly and gloriously wrong. I mean, most of this gauzy rhetoric is just rage bait. Unless you're next level obtuse, you know that Mr. Garcia is never coming back to the United States, ever. And that's not because of President Trump. That's because of Mr. President Bukele. He said up front in the Oval Office that he was not going to return Mr. Garcia. No federal judge, even Jay Wilkinson, has authority over a sovereign country. Besides that, it should not go unnoticed that Mr. Bukele is much closer to President Xi in China than he is to President Trump. Xi is spending billions of dollars to build infrastructure in El Salvador, and I wouldn't be surprised if they've discussed this case. The final point I would make, whether you agree with it or not, is Bukele hates MS-13. And Mr. Garcia allegedly is a member of MS-13. The other point I would make is that Chris says Mr. Garcia's had no due process. He's been in front of 17 judges, some of them twice, probably $5 million worth of legal fees, and he hadn't had to pay a dime. Final point I'd make, look, this was a screw-up, in my opinion. The administration won't admit it, but this was a screw-up. Mr. Garcia was not supposed to be sent to El Salvador. He was sent to El Salvador. The Democrats saying, look, you know, we told you Trump is a threat to democracy. This is going to happen every other Thursday afternoon. I don't see any pattern here. I mean, you know, someday pigs may fly, but I doubt it.
Senator, this is notable because you are saying, in your words, this is a screw-up. I mean, are you concerned that more mistakes could happen?
Well, sure. None of us want mistakes. Mistakes bad. Doing it right, good.
Yeah.
But it was a screw-up, and I understand why the administration is bowed up and said we won't admit it's a mistake, because if they do, they'll have their throats torn out. But it was a screw-up. I don't see any pattern here. I've been listening to my Democratic friends say for, I don't know, since God was a child, that Trump is a threat to democracy. I don't see any pattern here. I see a screw-up.
When life gives you chaos, do you know what you do? You just make a Lego set out of it. True story. I found myself at Legoland and waiting for the family. It just made me realise that this Easter, the masterpiece, the Trump administration, should actually be an Easter 2025 edition. Kind of the only Lego set where the pieces don't fit the instructions and everything's written in crayon, and as opposed to boxes on fire. First up, we have the Department of Government Efficiency. I'm sorry, it's a bit windy here. Led by none other than Elon Musk, because he streamlined the government. Remember, he fired, was it 77,000 federal workers? Still not sure. It's like Marie Kondo visited the White House and decided that, is that a plane? Don't fall from the sky. That's not funny. That none of the employees sparked joy. Next, let's talk about the Liberation Day tariffs. You remember President Trump declared April the 2nd as Liberation Day and imposed a 10% tariffs on all imports. Well, it started at 10%. Who knows where it's going to end up by the end of Easter? And nothing says liberation like making everything more expensive. It's like throwing a party and charging your guests at the door. Okay? And by the way, who can forget the hands-off protests? Well, most of cable news in America, they ignored the story. Millions of Americans actually took to the streets, demanded the administration keep their hands off of Social Security, Medicaid, and, well, everything else. Yeah, it's the first time in history I can think that people have protested to keep things exactly the same. Still not sure why that story wasn't covered by mainstream media. Well, legacy media is the correct 2025 term. Anyway, in a bold move, the administration decided to eliminate Head Start and make sweeping health cuts. Not sure about that one, because who needs early childhood education and healthcare when you can have, well, I'm not sure what you really get with the cuts. I have absolutely no idea what you're getting in return. Sorry about that. I'm just an outsider looking in. Anyway, let's not forget, since we're talking about cuts, the environmental policies. Is there anything environmentally actually existing which this administration is going to do? They propose changes to the Endangered Species Act, putting panthers, owls and turtles at risk. Because, sorry about the cliche, nothing says progress like endangering endangered species. There's a seagull, literally. A seagull flying around there. Anyway. In a twist no one saw coming, the administration sought corporate sponsors for the White House Easter event. That was hardly a surprise, because if you think of the resurrection of Jesus, you naturally think of product placement. Well, Trump does. You're just hoping, when's his family coming so he can stop wittering on while he's in the car? I'm waiting, I promise you. I'm literally outside Lego now, waiting for them to turn up. Anyway, there you have it, folks. The Trump administration Easter 2025 Lego set. It's chaotic, it's confusing, and guess what? It's missing half the pieces. And it hurts if you step on a piece not wearing anything on your feet. But hey, at least it's not, well, I was going to say boring, but you know, you'd rather it be boring. This Lego set is literally collapsing on itself. Remember, when life gives you chaos, wow, make a Lego set out.
We're in a crisis across the board, right? I mean, that is obvious for everyone to see. This is not normal. The president is assaulting the economy, assaulting Social Security, assaulting healthcare, assaulting the American way of life, and assaulting our democracy. None of this is normal. It is